My boss didn't just fire me. He tried to erase me. He took my bonus, my reputation, and the patent that would have saved my daughter's life. He thought I was just a quiet accountant who knew how to balance a ledger. He forgot one thing. If you know where every cent is hidden, you know exactly how to burn the house down without ever lighting a match. This isn't just business. It's the total, clinical destruction of a billionaire. And it started with a single missing stapler. For 7 years, I was the shadow behind Arthur Sterling. Arthur was the kind of CEO who wore $5,000 suits and treated human beings like disposable coffee filters. I handled his special accounts, the ones that didn't go to the IRS. I was loyal. I was silent. I was a ghost. The turning point was the Zenith project. I spent 18 months developing a logistics algorithm that cut shipping costs by 40%. It was worth millions. Arthur called me into his office, the smell of expensive cigars thick enough to choke a horse. "Great work, Elias," he said, not looking up from his golf magazine. "The board loves the results, but we're moving in a different direction. Your position has been redundantized." I stood there, numb. Redundant? "Arthur, my daughter's surgery is in 3 weeks. The bonus from Zenith was..." "The bonus was discretionary, Elias. And since you're no longer an employee, there is no discretion to exercise. Guards will escort you out. Don't touch the computer." He didn't just take the money. He had filed the patent in his name. My life's work was now his yacht fund. Most people would sue, but Arthur owned the lawyers. Most people would scream. But I'm an accountant. We don't scream, we calculate. I'd been prepared for this since day one. I never took a file home, but I had a photographic memory for numbers. I knew that Arthur was skimming from the employee pension fund to cover his gambling debts in Macau. It was a loan that never got repaid. I spent the next 6 months in a basement apartment, surrounded by legal pads. I wasn't looking for a way to get my money back. I was looking for the load-bearing wall, the one transaction that, if pulled, would cause the entire Sterling empire to collapse into a federal investigation. I found it. The Blue Horizon Initiative. I didn't attack Arthur directly. I went after his ego. I created a fake shell company, Vanguard Solutions, and hired a freelance actor to play a high-rolling investor. We approached Arthur with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy a distressed tech firm in Singapore. Arthur was greedy. He saw a chance to double his net worth and finally buy that private island he'd been eyeing. But he needed liquid cash, fast. More cash than he actually had. He did exactly what I predicted. He dipped into the pension fund one last time, thinking he could replace it before anyone noticed. Arthur Sterling had a weakness common to men of his stature. He believed he was the smartest person in any room. He didn't just want to be rich. He wanted to be a legend. When my actor, a seasoned corporate freelance consultant named Marcus, approached Sterling's firm as the representative for Vanguard Solutions, he didn't lead with a pitch. He led with a rejection. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," Marcus said during their first chance meeting at a high-stakes charity gala. "Vanguard is looking for a partner with a bit more liquidity. The Singapore acquisition is a shark tank. We need someone who can move $50 million in 48 hours without a board meeting. I'm not sure Sterling Enterprises has that kind of play money." It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. By questioning Arthur's power, Marcus had ensured that Arthur would move heaven and earth to prove him wrong. For the next 2 weeks, I watched from the shadows. I tracked Arthur's digital footprint, everything from his personal jet fuel consumption to his offshore wire transfers. He was hooked. He spent days obsessing over the Singapore tech firm, which, on paper, looked like a gold mine. In reality, it was a digital ghost I had constructed using 3 different shell companies and a very talented web designer. Arthur's CFO, a man named Henderson, was the only obstacle. Henderson was a by-the-book guy. He saw the red flags. I knew this because I had tapped Arthur's office intercom months ago and never disconnected the bridge. "Arthur, this Vanguard deal, something is off." Henderson's voice crackled through my speakers. "The due diligence is thin, and 50 million? We'd have to tap into the contingency reserves. If the market dips, we're exposed." "The market isn't gonna dip, Henderson," Arthur roared. "You're in bean counter. I'm a visionary. Vanguard is the ticket to the 10-figure club. If you don't have the stomach to sign the authorization, I'll find a CFO who does." That was the moment I knew I had him. Arthur wasn't just gambling with his money. He was gambling with his ego. He forced Henderson to take a sabbatical and appointed himself acting CFO. The gate was open. The Singapore deadline was set for Friday at 4 p.m. This was intentional. Banks are slower on Friday afternoons, and federal oversight usually clocks out early for the weekend. Marcus called Arthur at noon, sounding panicked. "Arthur, the Singapore board is getting cold feet. A group from Zurich just offered 60 million. If the funds aren't in the escrow account by the closing bell, the deal is dead. I've done what I can, but they want proof of wire now." I could almost hear Arthur's heartbeat through the surveillance. He was sweating. He didn't have 50 million in his personal accounts. He had spent too much on his new mansion in the Hamptons and a failed venture into crypto mining. He did exactly what I had spent 7 years documenting him doing on a smaller scale. He opened the Special Projects ledger. This was the account that held the employee pension fund. It was supposed to be untouchable, protected by federal law and a complex web of internal audits. But Arthur had the master keys. He convinced himself it was just a short-term loan. He would buy the Singapore firm, flip it in a month for 100 million, and put the pension money back before the quarterly audit. No one would ever know. With 3 clicks, $50 million, the retirement dreams of 2,000 employees, vanished from the Sterling Enterprises vault. It bypassed the standard verification because Arthur had disabled the redundant security protocols I'd helped him build years ago. The money hit the escrow account at 3:58 p.m. At 4:05 p.m., Marcus turned off his phone and tossed it into the Hudson River. At 4:10 p.m., the Vanguard Solutions website returned a 404 not found error. At 4:15 p.m., the $50 million was split into 6,000 different microtransactions, bouncing through crypto mixers and offshore accounts in countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. Arthur sat in his office, pouring a glass of 30-year-old scotch, waiting for the confirmation email that would never come. He thought he was a king. In reality, he was a man who had just handed me the rope to hang him with. The money wasn't gone, though. It was sitting in a secure, encrypted account under a name he'd never recognize: the Zenith Algorithm Recovery Trust. Now, all I had to do was make sure the right people noticed the hole he'd left behind. Monday morning didn't come with a bang. It came with a deafening, hollow silence. Arthur Sterling arrived at his office at 7 a.m., his gait confident, his chest puffed out like a peacock. He checked his private terminal, expecting a deal-confirmed notification from Singapore. Instead, he found a blank screen. He refreshed the page. Nothing. He checked the wire transfer status. It was marked complete, but the recipient account, the one Marcus had provided, now showed as invalid or non-existent. Arthur's hands began to shake. He grabbed his desk phone and dialed Marcus's private line. "The number you have dialed is not in service." He tried the Vanguard Solutions headquarters in New York. The line rang and rang until a generic automated voice informed him the mailbox was full. "Impossible," Arthur whispered, the ice of realization beginning to crawl up his spine. He spent the next 4 hours in a frantic, sweaty blur. He called the bank, screaming at a confused mid-level manager. "Where is my money? Trace the wire. I am Arthur Sterling." The manager's voice was cold. "Mr. Sterling, you authorized a non-reversible international wire to a private crypto custodian. Once those funds leave the clearinghouse, we lose visibility. You signed the indemnity waiver yourself." Arthur slammed the phone down so hard the plastic cracked. The room felt smaller. The expensive mahogany walls he once loved now felt like the sides of a coffin. The panic shifted from the loss of the money to the realization of the crime. The $50 million wasn't his. By noon, the sabbatical he had forced on Henderson, the CFO, was becoming a problem. Henderson had left a series of scheduled audit pings on the pension ledger. At 1 p.m., a red notification appeared on Arthur's screen. Discrepancy detected. Asset mismatch. $50 million. If that notification hit the main server, it would trigger an automatic report to the SEC and the Department of Labor. Arthur scrambled. He tried to patch the ledger, creating fake entries for consulting fees and intercompany loans. But for every hole he plugged, 3 more opened. He was an amateur trying to rewrite a professional's code. He spent the night in his office, his tie undone, the floor littered with shredded documents and empty scotch bottles. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a cornered rat. He didn't realize that every keystroke he made was being logged by me, captured in high definition as he attempted to commit a dozen counts of felony wire fraud and record tampering. I watched Arthur's meltdown through the hidden camera in his ceiling fan, a parting gift I'd installed during my final week. Watching him crumble was a form of therapy I hadn't known I needed. But the revenge wasn't complete until the world saw what I saw. On Tuesday morning, I didn't go to the police. The police are for street crimes. For a man like Arthur, you need the sharks. I sent 3 packages. The first went to the Department of Justice, DOJ. It contained a thumb drive with the original, unedited pension logs and the video of Arthur manually overriding the security protocols to steal the money. The second went to the Wall Street Journal. This was the publicity bomb. I included a detailed map of Arthur's offshore accounts and evidence that he had stolen the Zenith project patent from a redundant employee to pad his own net worth. I knew the headline would be "The Sterling Scam," and it would tank his stock price before lunch. The third package was the most personal. It went to Henderson, the sideline CFO. I sent Henderson the decryption keys to the hidden shadow ledger Arthur had kept for years. Henderson was a man of integrity, and I knew that once he saw how Arthur had been stealing from the employees' healthcare funds to pay for his Macau gambling trips, he wouldn't just testify. He would become the prosecution's star witness. By 2 p.m., the storm broke. I sat in a small coffee shop across from the Sterling Enterprises Tower, sipping a plain black coffee. First came the news vans. Then came the black SUVs. The whistleblower wasn't just a name on a report. I had created a digital persona that flooded social media with the hashtag Sterling Steals. Within an hour, the employees, the janitors, the coders, the mailroom staff realized their life savings were gone. A mob began to form at the base of the building. Arthur tried to flee. I saw him on the security feed, clutching a briefcase, trying to reach the service elevator. But I had already remotely locked the executive lift. He was trapped on the 42nd floor. When the FBI finally breached his office door, Arthur wasn't the lion he pretended to be. He was hiding in his private bathroom, trying to flush a pile of incriminating memos down a toilet that couldn't handle the volume. As they let him out in handcuffs, past the flashing cameras and the screaming employees, I made sure I was standing right in his line of sight. Our eyes met for 1 second. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just tapped my watch, the one he had given me for 5 years of loyal service. The time was up. The courtroom was not the arena of justice Arthur Sterling expected. He expected a stage where his charisma and high-priced legal team could weave a narrative of complex corporate misunderstandings. Instead, it was a cold, windowless room in the Southern District of New York that smelled of floor wax and old paper. Arthur sat at the defense table, flanked by 4 lawyers who cost more per hour than most of his employees made in a year. His lead counsel, a man named Sterling Vane, no relation but certainly the same breed, was known as the Eraser. He was there to make the $50 million hole disappear. "Your Honor," Vane began, his voice like polished marble, "this entire case is built on the word of a disgruntled former employee, a man who was fired for redundancy and who clearly has the technical skill to fabricate the very digital evidence he has provided to the DOJ." I sat in the back row of the gallery, wearing a cheap suit I'd bought at a thrift store. I wanted to look small. I wanted to look like the nothing Arthur thought I was. The prosecution called their first witness, Henderson. The former CFO walked to the stand with a heavy, rhythmic pace. He didn't look at Arthur. He looked at the jury, a group of 12 people who looked like they struggled with their own bills, the exact people Arthur had robbed. "Mr. Henderson," the prosecutor began, "did the defendant ever discuss the Blue Horizon Initiative with you?" "Yes," Henderson said, his voice steady. "He told me it was the future of the company. But when I asked to see the underlying assets, he told me I was losing my edge. He then bypassed my authorization codes to move funds into an escrow account I had no visibility over." Vane jumped up for the cross-examination. He spent 3 hours trying to paint Henderson as a senile, bitter old man who was jealous of Arthur's visionary leadership. He brought up a minor clerical error Henderson had made in 1994. He tried to grill him on the specifics of the server logs, but I had prepared for this. I had sent Henderson a study guide weeks prior, an anonymous folder containing every single log, time-stamped and verified by a third-party cybersecurity firm I'd hired, using a fraction of Arthur's stolen money. Every time Vane tried to find a gap, Henderson filled it with a concrete fact. Then came the character assassination phase. Arthur's team leaked stories to the press about me, claiming I was a corporate spy, that I had a history of mental instability, that I was the one who had set up the Vanguard solutions trap. They weren't wrong about the trap, but they couldn't prove it. I had used 7 layers of VPNs, 3 encrypted bridges, and Marcus, the actor, was currently sipping a Mai Tai on a beach in a country that didn't even have a telephone directory, let alone an extradition treaty. The turning point of the trial came on day 14, the Zenith Algorithm debate. Arthur's defense was that the Zenith project, the logistics algorithm I had invented, was actually his idea, and that I was merely the data entry clerk who had typed it out. If he could prove he owned the patent, he could argue that the $50 million was anticipated profit he was entitled to borrow against. The judge allowed a technical demonstration. Arthur was forced to stand at a terminal in front of the jury and explain the core logic of the Zenith algorithm. I watched him. He looked at the code on the screen, code I had written in a fever dream of late-night inspiration. To him, it was just a jumble of brackets and variables. To me, it was music. "Well, Mr. Sterling," the judge prompted, "can you explain how the recursive efficiency variable on line 402 calculates the fuel-to-weight ratio?" Arthur stammered. He tried to use buzzwords. It's a proprietary synergy of logistics and AI-driven metrics. It optimizes the throughput. That's a marketing slogan, Mr. Sterling, the prosecutor said, standing up. Can you explain the math? Arthur broke. I don't need to know the math. I'm the CEO. I hire people for the math. The idea was mine. The vision was mine. If the vision was yours, the prosecutor said, lowering his voice to a whisper that carried across the silent room, why does the source code contain a hidden digital watermark, a string of numbers that, when converted to text, spells out the name of Elias's daughter and the date of her birth? The courtroom went silent. Arthur's face went from pale to a deep, bruised purple. He looked at me in the gallery. I didn't blink. Vane tried to object, but it was over. The jury didn't see a visionary leader anymore. They saw a thief who didn't even understand what he had stolen. The meat grinder ground on for another month. We went through the Macau gambling records. We went through the secret recordings of Arthur laughing about cleaning out the grunts to pay for his yacht's gold-plated fixtures. By the time the prosecution rested, Arthur wasn't just facing 20 years for wire fraud. He was facing a multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit from every single employee he had ever hired. His legal team, realizing they weren't going to get paid because his accounts had been frozen, began to file motions to withdraw from the case. Arthur Sterling, the man who once owned the sky, was now sitting at a defense table with a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As the judge called for a recess before the final verdict, Arthur leaned over to his lawyer and whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch it. How did this happen? It was just one employee. He was nobody. I stood up, adjusted my thrift store tie, and walked out of the courtroom into the bright, honest sunlight. Nobody, I whispered to myself, is the most dangerous person in the world. The verdict had been a foregone conclusion, but the aftermath was where the real surgery began. Arthur Sterling was headed to a federal correctional facility, but his empire was still standing, a hollowed-out carcass of glass and steel that needed to be picked clean. This was the total liquidation, and I was the lead vulture. Because Arthur had used the company as his personal piggy bank, the court ordered a full fire sale of all assets to compensate the defrauded employees. It was a corporate funeral, and I attended every viewing. The first thing to go was the Sterling Crown, his 150-foot super yacht. I watched from the docks as a group of bankruptcy liquidators hauled away the custom Italian leather furniture and the gold-plated bidet. It sold for $6 million, pennies on the dollar, to a rental company that planned to use it for divorce parties. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then came the real estate. The Hamptons estate, the penthouse in Manhattan, the villa in Tuscany. One by one, the keys were handed over to strangers. I made sure to leak the maintenance secrets of the Hamptons house to the buyers, like the fact that the basement flooded every time it rained, just to ensure the price stayed low enough to hurt Arthur's remaining pride. But the centerpiece of the liquidation was Sterling Enterprises itself, specifically the intellectual property wing. This was my final chess move, because Arthur's legal team had failed to prove he was the inventor of the Zenith Algorithm. The patent was tied up in the company's bankruptcy. The court ruled that the patent was an asset of the firm, but because it was tainted by fraud, it was considered a high-risk purchase for any major tech company. I had the money, not the $50 million. That was safely tucked away in the employee trust I had secretly established, but the redundancy pay and the small inheritance I'd saved over a decade of living like a monk. The auction was held in a sterile conference room. There were 3 bidders. 2 were patent trolls, looking to buy the algorithm and sue everyone who used it. The third was me, representing the Phoenix Logistics Group, a company I had registered the day after I was fired. "We have an opening bid of $500,000 for the Zenith patent," the auctioneer droned. The trolls went back and forth, pushing it up to $2 million. They thought they were being aggressive. $2.5 million, I said, my voice cutting through their posturing. They looked at me, the guy in the thrift store suit, and laughed. They raised to $3. $10 million, I said. The room went dead silent. The trolls didn't have $10 million in liquid cash. They worked on credit and margins. I had the Zenith Algorithm Recovery Trust. I had used the very money Arthur had lost to the Singapore scam, which, through a series of legal loops I designed, had been recategorized as an anonymous donation to my new firm to buy back my own life's work. I walked out of that room with the deed to my invention. I didn't just have my job back, I had the entire foundation of the industry. The final stage of the liquidation was the most satisfying. I visited the Sterling Enterprises tower one last time before the new owners took over. I walked into Arthur's office. It was stripped bare. No cigars, no golf magazines, no ego. Just a single, dusty desk. I sat in his chair. It wasn't as comfortable as I thought it would be. I realized then that Arthur didn't love the power. He loved the theater of it. I, however, loved the results. I picked up the phone, the one I had used to listen to his downfall, and dialed the warden of the facility where Arthur was being held for processing. "Tell inmate 77492 that his algorithm just saved the company," I said. "And tell him the new CEO is looking for a redundant data entry clerk. I hear he's looking for work." I hung up, took a deep breath of the empty room, and started the process of transferring every cent of the auction proceeds, millions upon millions, back into the pension accounts of the people who actually built the company. Arthur Sterling was bankrupt. His name was being scrubbed from the building. His legacy was a cautionary tale in business textbooks. And my daughter's surgery? It was scheduled for Monday, paid for in full by the very man who tried to leave her with nothing. Time has a funny way of flattening the mountains we think we're climbing. 5 years had passed since the doors of the Southern District Court slammed shut behind Arthur Sterling. 5 years since I traded my thrift store suit for the quiet life of a man who no longer had to look over his shoulder. I stood on the balcony of a modest beach house in Oregon. No gold-plated bidets, no mahogany-paneled walls, just the salt air and the sound of my daughter, Clara, laughing as she chased a golden retriever through the surf. Every time she ran, truly ran, without a limp or a wheeze, I felt the weight of the Zenith project. It wasn't just code anymore. It was the bone and muscle of my child's future. The long game isn't about the initial explosion of revenge. It's about the fallout. It's about what happens when the cameras stop flashing and the headlines are used to wrap fish. Arthur Sterling didn't do well in prison. Men like Arthur rely on a social currency that doesn't exist behind a chain-link fence. In the corporate world, his bullying was called assertiveness. In the yard, it was just a target on his back. According to the reports I received from a contact I kept in the system, Arthur spent his first 2 years trying to consult for the other inmates. He tried to teach them how to leverage their commissary accounts. He tried to build a hierarchy where he was at the top. But you can't build an empire when you don't own the ground you stand on. Eventually, he stopped talking. The man who once filled stadiums with his visionary leadership seminars was now a gray, stooped figure who spent his days in the prison library, staring at old magazines. He was obsessed with the business section. He would cut out any mention of the Phoenix Group. My company hadn't just survived, it had revolutionized global trade. By making the Zenith algorithm open source for small businesses while charging a premium for the conglomerates, I had leveled the playing field. I didn't want to be the next Arthur Sterling. I wanted to make sure there could never be another one. I didn't have to go. My lawyers told me it was a bad idea, but I needed to close the loop. I drove to the Federal Correctional Institution on a Tuesday, the same day of the week Arthur had fired me. The visiting room was a symphony of buzzing lights and the smell of industrial bleach. Arthur was let in. He looked like a ghost of himself. The $5,000 suits were replaced by a rough denim jumpsuit. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was a thin, white halo. He sat down and looked at me through the plexiglass. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "You look well, Elias," he finally said. His voice was raspy, stripped of its theatrical boom. "I am," I replied. "Clara is healthy. She's starting middle school in the fall." Arthur flinched at the name. He remembered the bonus he'd stolen. "I suppose you came here to gloat, to tell me how much the Phoenix Group is worth on the NYSE." "Actually, I came to give you something." I slid a manila envelope into the transfer slot. The guard inspected it and handed it to Arthur. Inside was a single, laminated sheet of paper. It was a balance sheet. Arthur squinted at the numbers. "What is this?" "That is the Sterling Employee Pension Fund," I said. "It's back to 110% capacity. Every person you robbed has been made whole, plus interest. The Zenith Trust paid out the final dividend last month." Arthur stared at the paper. His eyes welled up, not with remorse, I realized, but with the sheer mathematical beauty of a plan he could never have conceived. "You used my own theft to fund the recovery. The Singapore wire. It was a loop." "It was a mirror, Arthur. You saw what you wanted to see. A shortcut to more wealth. I just provided the reflection." He looked up at me, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "You're just like me, Elias. You're a predator. You just hide it better behind your family man routine." I shook my head. "No. A predator eats until the forest is empty. A steward plants so the forest can grow. You never understood the difference between owning something and being responsible for it." I stood up to leave. "Wait," Arthur barked, pressing his palms against the glass. "One thing. Just tell me one thing. The stapler. In your first video, you mentioned a missing stapler. Was that real?" I paused at the door. I remembered that rainy Tuesday 5 years ago. I remembered Arthur screaming at me because his favorite red stapler wasn't on his desk, using it as an excuse to humiliate me in front of the board before delivering the news of my redundancy. "It wasn't about the stapler, Arthur," I said quietly. "It was about the fact that you thought you could treat a human being like an office supply. You thought I was a tool you could just put in a drawer and forget about." I walked out of the prison and didn't look back. The Phoenix Group is now a worker-owned cooperative. I still run the tech side, but the decisions are made by the people who do the work. We don't have redundancies. We have transitions. As the sun set over the Pacific, I watched Clara throw a ball for the dog. The world is a loud, chaotic place, and there will always be men like Arthur Sterling, men who think the rules don't apply to them, men who think they can build their thrones on the backs of the nobodies. But they forget one thing. The nobodies are the ones who know where the screws are. We're the ones who know how the engine runs. And if you push us too far, we won't just stop the machine. We'll rebuild it so it doesn't need you anymore. Arthur Sterling died in that prison 3 years later. His obituary was 3 lines. My daughter's graduation speech? That was front page news. And that's the best revenge of all.